What was only going to last a year has almost stretched out to double that. But here we are, part 7 of the Genlocke and the Alola region that comes with it, and the official final part of this project. Quick disclaimer before we start. You can probably hear that the audio isn't as good as it usually is. Well, that's because I've newly moved into a new apartment, and until I fix the acoustics, we will just have to deal with the audio as it is. Alright? Okay, let us begin. After moving into Alola, meeting Professor Kukui and the locals, and saving a little dust cloud from a flock of Spearow, we get our starter in Iki Town. My choice is obviously the superior ball of fluff that is Archimedes the Rowlet. We then take on Hau and his Poplio, before we get a quick cutscene and a catching tutorial the next day. Which leads us to battling Hau again, this time with both of us having an additional Pokemon to use. Hau with his Pichu and me with Milo the Caterpie. Yup, I got my favorite Pokemon of all time as the first encounter. Lucky me! So anyway, beating Hau here is a breeze, Milo evolves into a Metapod and the game continues. Lily gets us the next morning so we can visit Kukui at Hau'oli outskirts. While there, we get Oscar the Yungoos, not the strongest encounter around, but he'll make do. Kukui then upgrades our Pokédex into the Rotonex and we are off to the races. After reaching the first Pokemon Center, I add Helios and Celine to the team as legacies. But don't worry, I actually won't use much of my legacies for this playthrough. These two are temporary additions that don't affect gameplay too much. And also, see how the death counter is at 27? Yeah, a slight spoiler for that. That is going to increase to 36 by the end of this run. 9 whole deaths await us in Alola. Anyway, visiting the trainer school, I then managed to find and catch Pestilence the Alolan Grimer. Arguably one of the best encounters in the game full stop, with some very good stats for early game that rival that of your starter, and only one weakness in ground types that are also really rare to find in the early game. Alolan Grimer and Muk are formidable encounters to get your hands on. You'll struggle a bit in the mid game while waiting for it to evolve, but otherwise one of the most solid Pokemon you can use. We beat up the students and the teacher, then move on, cutscene, we get to Hau'oli City, and there we encounter and capture Gilbert the Magnemite. Another amazing encounter, as I doubt I have to explain how good a Magnemite is. We then move on to the marina, beat some grunts from the region's evil team, Team Skull, Milo evolves into a Butterfree, and then we battle Elima, who is the first quote-unquote boss fight of the game. And his Marigold can end up sniping some Pokemon if you're not careful, especially when you pick Rowlet as your starter, as he gets access to Ember, which does hit a lot of the early game Pokemon for super effective damage. So this is where the majority of my legacy usage is spent for now, with Helios managing to burn and stall up most of Smeargle's HP before it falls. With Elima defeated, we can now move on as he will let us take on the trial. Our next stop is Route 2, and here we can get one of the best encounters for the first trial. If you're playing during the day or the night and have Yungoos or Rattata already caught respectively, the ambush encounter in the circled area here will always grant you a Makuhita as your encounter, who's able to hit the Totem Pokemon for super effective stat boosted fighting type attacks, which is what we catch ourselves in the form of Maui. Then we get to the cemetery where we also get Georgie the Drifloon. Now for the trial itself. Taking on the wild Pokemon is no problem, watch out for Gumshoe's bite though, and Team Skull is a joke. The totem you fight might look big and scary as well, but they only have a boost in their defense. And they call the SOS Pokemon to help, but other than that, it's just a big Raticate or a Gumshoes. You also should have picked up the Technical Machine for Brick Break within the cavern just before, which can let you even a Lediba deal a chunk of damage to them. A chunk for a Lediba anyway. Your best options are Makuhita or Crabrawler though, or even a Machop you can trade for a Spearow if you got that. And don't use Ghosts, both of those have Bite to knock them out. My strategy was fairly simple. Maui leads, uses Brick Break, he doesn't quite knock out the Totem, but he knocks out the partner Rattata, and then I switch into Milo and take the Totem out. With the trial done, we are now allowed to grab an encounter in the Verdant Cavern ourselves, so we scoop up a Rattata of our own before leaving. Kukui teaches how to use C-moves, we then head to Route 3, catch a Spearow which I later trade for the Machop I mentioned earlier, we then find Lily at the Mellow Meadows, where Nebby has gotten out of the bag again. There we catch ourselves Tachikawa the Petilil, then evacuate the Zubat inside of the Seaward Cave before we battle against Hau once more, and now was the time for the Grand Trial. Hala is pretty destructive for our first Grand Trial. Or he would be, weren't it for the fact that Melemele has a bunch of Pokemon that are perfect for dealing with him. Use your starter or any other Pokemon of choice to deal with Mankey, then use the cemetery encounter against Makuhita. Yes, even the Zubat since it gets wing attack early. The only real issue is Crabrawler who sports the C move. Well, as it turns out, if you use any of the early game bug types here, Crabrawler can score a KO with his C move. And something like Ladybug and Butterfree completely evolves by being 4 times resistant to those fighting moves. As you can guess, I have my all-time favorite Butterfree on the team, along with Rowlet, 2 Pokemon who hard resist most of everything Crabrawler and the rest of Hala's team wants to do. So my plan here is fairly obvious. Tunnel vision on the fact Gilbert has started to live the C move, then lose both him and Maui to the Crabrawler before Archimedes can clean up for me. Yeah, that wasn't my best performance, and it's going to happen a couple more times in this run. After that blunder and beating Hala, we get the Tauros Poke Ride, so I did some cleanup on Melee using it. Got 2 more encounters in Tenkaret Hill and the Farthest Hollow, in the form of Sander the Rockruff and Adam the Alolan Diglett, and then we were off to Akala Island. After accidentally losing Pestilence during a grinding session. 3 down on Melee alone. With the entire gang setting foot on Akala, we met Olivia and Mallow who greets us welcome, and then we're allowed to roam freely. 2 randoms approached us and one of them wanted to battle for some reason, but she was easy pickings. On Route 4, we get our first Akala Island encounter, Didi the Pikipek. We then have a brief spat with Hao in Paniola Town before we move on to the ranch and we get another encounter in Henrik the Lillipup. Before we get to Brooklet Hill for our second trial, this cartoon character named Gladion shows up and challenges us to a battle. His Zubat was easy enough and the combined efforts of Tachikawa and Milo take down type Null. Then, before we continue to take on the trial, we get Floyd the Fomantis on that very same route. Inside of Brooklet Hill, Captain Lana greets us, but before we can even start, we get an encounter here, in the form of Hero Michi the Poliwag, and this is actually a hard counter for the upcoming trial, because he happens to have Water Absorb instead of Damp. And the only attacking move of the Totem Wishiwashi is Water Gun, so he can't hurt us at all. The only issue then becomes his SOS Pokemon. What you need to truly break through Wishiwashi then becomes special attackers or super effective moves from grass or electric types. So the best Pokemon to use, in no particular order here, becomes the aforementioned Poliwag with Water Absorb, Magnemite, Charjabug, Sylveon, Espeon, Butterfree, or Petilil. Just beware of it using Sulk to turn you into a water type. So, we do as Lana tells us until we reach the Totem's Den, where we start the fight with the Totem Wishiwashi. Hero Michi starts off strong with Hidden Power, which incidentally turns out to be the Grass type one. Hero Michi was literally put on this planet specifically to take down this totem, and take it down he does, with Archimedes coming in and performing cleaning duty by taking out the remaining Alomomola. With Lana then giving us both the Votrium set and the fishing rod, we could backtrack just a little bit and get some encounters, starting with the fishing spot in Paniola Town, granting us Kaido the Magikarp. And because of this, we could backtrack back to the Totem's Den, which counts as a separate location in the files, and fish up a Wishiwashi of our own, which we name Bristling, and he is going to be a valuable asset. With the story continuing, we head to Route 6 and capture Gibson the Grubbin. We then take down some more Team Skullgrunts to get into the Royal Avenue, and meet Hapu along the way. A quick Battle Royale cutscene later and we unlock Route 7, where we capture Winston the Wingull, and inside the Vela Volcano Park we find and capture Fox the Fletchling. And now it was time to take on the easiest totem battle in the game, Totem Salazzle. There is no real strategy needed here, just get any of the water types you have access to at this point in the game, fishing for them and whatnot, teach them Scald after picking the technical machine up in Brooklet Hill, give them the Votrium set and use Hydro Vortex. Lana really said, here, take this fishing rod and use it to break my ex's legs. Which is what we do with Bristling, 1 Hydro Vortex and the trial is done. With the Pokerad for Charizard now unlocked, I can backtrack and get some more encounters, in the form of Shame the Love Disc, Calamari the Tentacle and then Akuja the Shelter, all on Melee, before we head back to Akala again. Evaki has evolved into a Chromat by now, which is what I am planning to use against the upcoming Totem Lurantis. I also end up snagging Oroku the Wimpod on Route 8. So now, let's talk about Totem Lurantis, the killer of many Nuzlockes, and I get it. It houses a lot of power due to the fact that it can hit as hard as it can, especially due to Castform being able to send Sunny Day. I actually don't have that much to say for how to deal with it. Your best bet is with Crobat or another poison types who can resist everything Lurantis tries to do and then knock it out in 2 hits or so. Or you can use Gyarados with Intimidate, that is always an option. Or just sniping it as quickly as you can with Firium set Inferno Overdrive if you have a strong enough fire type. And you can even use the Flame Charge that you got from Colress earlier to increase your speed and then hopefully outspeed the Lurantis on the next turn. The trial goes as it usually goes and I get to Lurantis. Evanki is able to tank the hits from Lurantis, but sadly, Evanki is just barely not strong enough to properly knock out the Lurantis without racking up a ton of damage on herself, and she ends being taken out by the cast form afterwards. So I guess I should have given her more attack effort values, I guess. But thankfully, Oscar cleans up, winning us the trial straight afterwards. And with the trial done, I can now get the encounter in the lush jungle, which ends up being Curios the Pinsir, a mighty powerful encounter if I may say so myself. A whole lot of plot happens in between the grinding, with us reviving the Archon fossil, catching a Ghastly on Memorial Hill, and even battling Plumeria of Team Skull. And then we finally reach the grand trial of Akala Island. Kahuna, Olivia, and her rock-type Pokémon. Olivia isn't that difficult to prepare for in the long run. You have plenty of water types to pick from, along with a lot of general use Pokémon that can do a number on her. The real issue is the fact that her Nosepass and Moldor have the Sturdy ability, so you can never one-shot them unless you have something like Mold Breaker, and they can end up crippling your chances. And of course, her Lycanroc is incredibly powerful with its Rockium set to deal massive damage. Bring resistances and special attacks, that's all I'll say. My strategy was fairly simple. Macho uses Brick Break twice on Nosepass, Hiromichi uses Scald twice on Boldor, Leshana then comes in and Olivia chooses to not use her C-move, letting Leshana knock out Lycanroc with Hydro Vortex. Okay, weird, but we take those. Following Olivia's defeat, a lot of plot-related shenanigans happen over at the Aether Foundation, and we are then dumped off on Ula Ula Island, and we face the final boss of this half of the game. How? This How battle is actually unfair, because he leads with Alolan Raichu. This thing is so fast, hits so hard, and if you're not leading with the right Pokemon going into this battle, you're almost guaranteed to lose at least one Pokemon, if not your entire team, because it can sweep you. The combined effort of Leshana and Oscar get me out of the pickle with Raichu. Hiromichi takes out Flareon with a C-move, and Archimedes then takes care of Brionne, and we escape this battle without a loss. For now. This was only the first half of the game, and there's some mighty powerful opponents waiting for us in the second half. But you'll just have to wait until next time to see what all of that is about. So until next time, Koboclaw signing out. Have a good one.